Hello and welcome to today's special edition of Studio Army Review. This is the introductory video for my Exodite army. The Exodites that, as I put them together, are actually a combination of three separate codices to come up with a representation of the Exodites in the Eldar fluff. So I want to briefly go over kind of how I got to this point and develop the different codices to represent the models and what have you, just in general. And then I'm going to break into three separate Studio Army Review sets where I'll go over each of the codices and the units as the models represent them. So this series of videos will actually be a little more detailed, a little different than the ones before, as I not only will show you the different units themselves, talk about how I use them, but talk about how I interpreted the various units in the codices to represent an Exodite element. So I actually began working, kind of wanting to do Eldar back in the 5th edition, but I really did not like the way the Eldar looked. I love space elves, or elves in general, so space elves I got excited about them, but I didn't like the look of the Dark Eldar. I did not really like the look of the Eldar models, and especially with their primary weapons being such short range. I really did not like them. Now, of course, I didn't understand the mechanics of the Eldar army at the time, so it may have been a little rash judgment, but I still think, looking back, I don't think I would have played Eldar if I wasn't able to get an Exodite feel to it. So there's a little hint there, which at least one of the three codices that make up my Exodite army. Now, one of the things that happened in the course of the 5th edition is I started reading about the different factions and what have you, and as I read through the Eldar, I learned about the Exodites. I thought, oh, this is cool, because it spoke to that almost a wood elf kind of a interpretation of Eldar, and I really liked the idea of them almost being self-imposed exile segment of the population. And I, being an outdoorsman and my love for nature and conservation, I thought, their whole living on their maiden worlds, pristine jungle type worlds, are I really could relate to it. So I got excited, but at the time I found a couple Exodite codices fan-made with some really, I thought they were kind of cool units, but I was still new to my game club or game group, and the general sense I got was there really wasn't an appetite to really allow non-official codices, so I kind of was stuck just imagining things and just dreaming about it. Well, then I looked at the possibility of doing Eldar, but the Eldar have vehicles, and there's all these different strange units. None of them really could be dinosaurs or anything like that, so I kind of felt like I was really never going to come up with a dream that would work. In the end, though, I was able to figure a method out. So before I go into talking about that, I want to kind of walk through the actual story. So for those of you who don't know anything about the Exodites, I'm going to kind of walk through what this is all about. So, long before man had reached its hand out to the stars, the Eldar were an ancient race. They had traveled the galaxy and learned its many secrets. They sought knowledge and wisdom and began to understand the very fabric of the universe and the realm referred to as the Immaterium, the warp. They used their technology to create hundreds of worlds suited to their needs, the maiden worlds, many of which they had already begun to settle. They built thousands of cities in the realm between reality and the Immaterium, where they would travel to reach the farthest points of the galaxy. Their mastery of technology was into magic, and they applied it to every task in their lives. Technology had saved the Eldar race from enslavement to the drudgery of daily work. They had become free to pursue all that their curiosity would call them to. They would pursue every pleasure they could find. They did not realize the road upon which they had embarked, for the Farseers saw what to them was a paradise into which the Eldar would carry themselves. Unfortunately, what is paradise to some is hell to others. The Eldar nature is one of extremes, and they excelled in all they did and felt with an unfathomable passion, whether joy and sorrow, fulfillment and loneliness, pleasure and boredom. As the ages went by, they sought out more intense experiences to satisfy the craving of whatever need they created in themselves. Soon cults began to form where like-passioned Eldar would share in their experiences and encourage each other along their chosen path to pleasure. Some had seen clearly the inevitable end to which this road would lead, and they cried out warnings to their kin in a vain attempt to save their great civilization and race. These were scorned and ridiculed as backwards, and even branded as oppressors attempting to deny the Eldar that which they desired. Seeing their warnings going unheeded, they decided to flee a once beautiful homeworld that had become the killing fields of murder cults and others who sought the destruction of others to fulfill themselves. These Eldar were, in fact, the wisest of their race, and by virtue of the belief in what their farseers had foreseen, they would be among the few that would escape the destruction that would swallow the rest of the great Eldar race. They were the Exodites. Then, in the 30th millennium, they gathered their they gathered those of like mind and assembled fleets upon which they would go out and settle upon one of the many as yet unsettled maiden worlds. They took with them the material and supplies they needed to create what they would need upon their new homes. Unnumbered such fleets left the Eldar homeworld, but it was just a small fraction of the Eldar race. Their journey was long and fraught with danger, for by this time, humans and orcs had spread across the galaxy, and many of their kind were raiders or pirates. The humans distrusted what was alien to them, and the orcs fought with all they encountered. Some fleets never made it to their promised land, but most would choose among the worlds scattered throughout the galaxy. Upon these worlds, they sought to recreate the civilization as it had been before the technology made life easy. They chose to work the land and tend herds of native beasts for food and raw materials. To the unperceptive eye, their weapons seemed primitive, but in fact, their weapons were more than met the eye. Some are psychically charged, as opposed to just psychically activated, sending small doses of psychic energy at their target carried by the weapon itself. Other weapons employed natural poisons they had made from the native flora of their new home. Still, wisdom had not left the Exodite portion of the race, and they employ many of the older weapon technologies brought with them thousands of years ago. Most notable about the Exodites is their reliance upon native dinosaur-like creatures to serve as weapon platforms and transports. All sizes of these beasts, which are referred to as dragons by the Exodites themselves, are employed in various fashions across the army. Some are even given additional armor, barding, as protection. Now, even with this reliance upon native creatures, they are known to employ other vehicles similar to current Elder vehicles. However, the one construct they are most known for is the Exodite Knight, used to battle the Imperial Knights on worlds where humans have dared establish a presence. So that's the general history and backstory to the Exodites as a whole. And the challenge was to try to make an army that reflected that idea of using more primitive weapons and even the beasts and dinosaur-like creatures. Now, fortunately, there were some dinosaurs in the GW line, but not a whole lot, so that was a little bit challenging. So, as I started to look through some of the codices, I stumbled upon a Kroot codex, actually, that was kind of revamped in the 6th edition. And what they basically abandoned, it's the completely Kroot codex, and they kind of abandoned their old 5th edition codex and used in their 6th edition a combination of Eldar and Dark Eldar units to represent these various Kroot units and abilities. And I was actually inspired by some of the reinterpretation of the Eldar and Dark Eldar rules to make these Kroot. So I thought, oh, you know what? I could do that. That type of reinterpretation actually is very similar to the old hero game systems, where you had, in order to make your special powers or magic or whatever it was, you used a set of special or effects that you applied special effects to them. So a gun would be, we think of it as a gun, but really it's just a ranged physical attack, and with all these other abilities attached to it. And there's the idea of reinterpreting the effect in a different way got my mind thinking. So the first one was trying to figure out, weapons. So trying to search the different codices, Eldar made sense to use them. 12-inch range on a main weapon does not describe a bow at all. So, and really a spear is a one-use throw, so that didn't make sense either. So it took me a bit, but I realized that the Dark Eldar had sure splinter weapons, and rifles and what have you, using poison, and they were firing 24 inches, which is longer range than crossbows. Now, in history, the typical crossbow had much shorter range than a longbow or than a bow of equal weight. So a medium longbow or medium bow would shoot farther than a medium crossbow, mostly because the crossbow itself did not fire. It fired a flatter trajectory and a heavier bolt, so it wasn't able to travel as far. So right there, I was able to see. Yes, I could use crossbows for the crossbows for the shorter weapons and bows for the longer ones. So, but I couldn't see how to use a lot of the units. So, but at least I had to start. So I began the journey down this Exodite army with the Eldar Codex, starting with crossbows and adding in a few bows from here. And then, since as I mentioned in the backstory of the Exodites, they didn't completely give up all the Eldar technology, especially for war. So I was able to use some of the units, and so I do have some of the jet bikes and walkers and what have you there. And of course the Exodite Knight, which I actually already have out on my channel as a model showcase. So go ahead and take a look at that in more detail. That represents the construct that they used is actually represented in the Epic game that Games Workshop put out to fight the Imperial Knights. So that is the overall introduction to my Exodites. And as we move into the next video, I will talk about the house clans, the central portion of my Exodite world. The next one after that series, the House Clans series, I will go into Independent Clans series, which are later arrivals to the Exodite world of Lorien that I've developed, and that'll be a separate Studio Army Review series. And the final series will cover the Dragonmasters, which uses a third codex that I will not reveal at this time to really take the whole idea of using the native flora and fauna to the extreme, using actual dragons or dinosaurs and what have you. Now, I will fair warning that there are a lot of GW models represented, but in some of the units I will have used something other than a GW model. So if you don't feel comfortable with running armies that don't have GW models exclusively or primarily GW based models, then you might not be able to pull off the Exodites in the way in which I have tried. But I hope you do enjoy this series, give you a completely different way of interpreting the codices that I'll be talking through, and hope you enjoy the model conversions that I've done. So until the next one, which we will talk about the house clans, thank you, and again, comment, like, share, and subscribe. All right, bye-bye.